Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing this wonderful book which I recently finished, Across the Blue by Carrie Turansky, a Christian historical fiction romance. I had recently read another of her books, Shine Like the Dawn, and I really loved it, so I decided to check out another. Like this, for whatever reason, this was the only copy available at any of the local libraries, was in large print, and I ended up like quickly, just getting into it. And like reading large print, you shouldn't feel ashamed of it, even if your eyes aren't like, your sight isn't like fading or anything like that. Sometimes it's just a really cool experience. And I did have a recent video talking about, large print books when you're not, hard of sight. But anyway, let's just get down with it and like read the description on the back. Someone at the library did cover this, but I looked the rest up on Amazon, and because large print and obvious from the context, not really too much is missing. Isabella Grayson, the eldest daughter of a wealthy English newspaper magnate, longs to become a journalist, but her parents don't approve. They want her to marry well and help them gain a higher standing in society. After she writes an anonymous letter to the editor that impresses her father, her parents reluctantly agree she can write a series of articles about aviation and the race to fly across the English Channel under a pseudonym, of course, like women in society. Oh no, they're stepping out of their place. What would anyone think of you? So, of course she has to, you have a pseudonym, but anyway, but only if she promises to accept a marriage proposal within the year. That's the bigger, part of the bargain. When James Drake, an aspiring aviator, crashes his flying machine at the Graysons' new estate, Bella is intrigued. James is determined to be the first to fly across the channel and win the prize Mr. Grayson's newspaper is offering. He hopes it will help him secure a government contract to build airplanes and redeem a terrible family secret. James wants to win Bella's heart, but his background and lack of social standing make it unlikely her parents would approve. If he fails to achieve his dream, how will he win the love and respect he is seeking? Will Bella's faith and support help him find the strength and courage he needs when unexpected events turn their world upside down? And as I said, I really, really love this book. I rated like a 5-star read. I just loved all the touches of history throughout. It's set in 1909. Fumbling. Sorry, this video is completely unscripted. When the real life race to be the first to fly an airplane across the English Channel was on, and I was kind of looking through it to see, oh, they really are mentioning real life historical figures who fly across it. So it's always nice to see that blend of real life historical people interacting with fictional characters. Like some writers do it a little bit differently, but I liked how it was done here in a way that seems believable. Oh, these people really might have interacted with fictional characters or people like them in this way. It was done very well, and I just loved, there were so many different storylines intersecting, in addition to the ones I mentioned on the blurb. Bella wants to become a journalist, and her parents, particularly her by the book's mother, disapprove, and James is trying to become the first to fly across the English Channel, and he's also trying to solve a family secret. He lives with a professor, and Martha, the woman who runs the farm they're staying by when they're working on their flying machine experiments, but they're not blood related to him. He was born out of wedlock, and he has no idea who his father or his mother is. He does find out somewhat quickly in the novel who his mother was. He had never heard her name before. He finds some stuff in the attic, and he starts uncovering a little bit more about his mother's identity. I don't want to give too much away. And then he has no clue who his father might be. And then a couple of clues start surfacing here and there, but sadly his mother passed away in a terrible accident when he was 4 months old. He had no idea about that either. She fell off of a cliff by the beach, holding him in her arms. A miracle he survived. And why didn't my father ever try to contact me in all these years, despite the disreputable, according to society, my origins, that? Why didn't any of my grandparents ever help to find me, give me money or anything like that and things? And he starts discovering some clues additionally because of the estate Bella's family is living on. Oh, there's some clues I had never thought. Maybe my parents or my father's identity might be closer than I had ever suspected, and drawing it out piecemeal from the different characters, and I just loved his faith is gradually growing, and like Bella's faith is also growing. I took a bunch of notes in one of my little new notebooks to talk about the things that really popped out about this story to me. And another storyline subplot is Bella's younger sister Sylvia is making her debut in society, and she's really excited about it. Like Bella enjoyed it too, of course. Like most upper class like young ladies of that era, that was something really fun. Oh, presented at court and going to balls and stuff. But like Bella was always wanted to become a journalist more, and like Sylvia's yay pretty dresses. I love dancing with all these handsome young men and meeting really cool fun people at society dinner parties and teas and luncheons. That's totally cool. Many times, as I wrote in my notes about what I liked about the book, like siblings have, and other people in the same family, they have much different interests, but they're united by common bonds. And sometimes even if you're raised by the same parents, you're relatively close in age, in the same house, same generation, life circumstances, you can come out having a completely different personality. You like much different things. And many other things I liked about this, the architectural details. Like I love vintage, like old architecture. I should do a whole video based on a blog post about my favorite architectural styles. Queen Anne revival is my favorite because they look like haunted houses, and number 2 favorite is like Tudor revival. I love the half timbering. It just creates a lovely antique look. And I also love the interior decoration details. That's always something fun. It really helps to do the world building and set the scene for a book, instead of just saying, oh, it was a big house, or not even bothering to describe like anything in the house. I mean, I guess sometimes of course you can go overboard. You don't want to constantly do like, oh, describing what a house and a room look like you want to get to the main story. But it's nice to have these little details really like bringing out the world these characters live in. And I love the description of the Edwardian, fashions, the kind of dresses they wore, like clip-on earrings. At least in like parts of the West at this point in time, like many women felt like real pierced ears were disreputable, so they would wear like a huge like clip-on. So I haven't worn clip-ons for years and decades. Like I was so eager to get my ears pierced for real, but like back in those days, many upper crust society girls and women, they would only wear clip-on earrings, like particularly in the US and like the United Kingdom and Canada. I think in other parts of Europe, like in the East, like real pierced ears were the norm, but like definitely at this point in time in like England and like the English speaking world, like clip-on earrings were like what women wore. So it's nice to see that historical detail pointed out as well. And like the wearing the hair up. Sylvia, who's 18, she's so excited to start wearing her hair up when she makes her society debut. And a lot of like writers, I mean, I know they're genuinely not doing this to sound like ignorant, like, or like, oh, I'm just like being as radical as possible. And like in their minds, because they've seen it modeled so many times, they're like, oh, how do I establish a woman as like independent or strong-minded, like ahead of her time, progressive values of more relevance and interest to a modern audience? Oh, I know, she won't want to wear her hair up, and she'll think corsets are death traps, and she doesn't want to wear long skirts. Like, but that was completely historically inaccurate. Most young ladies, they looked forward to like wearing their hair up when they made their like debut in society, or like, turned 16 or 14 or whatever the custom might have been, where they lived or their particular family. They started wearing their skirts all the way down to their ankles, and they started wearing a real corset, graduating from the so-called like corset waist, which was like a long like fitted type of garment with like that buttoned up. That I should do that whole video about that, like myths and facts about corsets in historical fiction. But anyway, and I also enjoyed the discussion of the different income levels of the characters, which also included like old versus new money, particularly for the Graysons. It wasn't just about, oh, I'm rich now, so people will welcome me in society. Not necessarily. You want to, prove your worth if you're new money. People took these class distinctions very seriously. Even the middle class, the bourgeoisie, they had specific income levels depending on like how much money you had and how many years your family had been at that position. So it wasn't just, oh yeah, I have money now, I'm completely welcome in all aspects of high society, and my daughters can easily marry any rich man and get invited to any party. They had to, like prove themselves over time because like society was like extremely divided by class. And I know many people in the modern era that, oh, everyone is trying to be or thinks or claims to be middle class, but it really wasn't like that fairly recently in society. And I enjoyed how it shows Bella has progressive interest in views for 1909, for example, like, women in journalism, and she doesn't condemn James when she finds out he was born out of wedlock, and in fact she tries to help him. I also enjoyed that part of the story. She's helping him to do some research, like genealogical stuff at the archives of the Daily Mail. Oh, I'm really going to help you, James. Like, she, of course, she's like in love with him and growing stronger and stronger, more attracted to him and likes him as a friend too, but she also genuinely wants to help him and doesn't believe, he should be like condemned or cut out of society just because of like who his parents were or the like, circumstances of his birth. It wasn't his fault. But it does these kind of like progressive for the era like interests and personalities without 21st century presentism, as I was just mentioning. Like, even the most radical against the grain characters, as I've said so many times in blog posts, like they still would have operated within like certain parameters and had certain lines they wouldn't cross, and maybe they would have had some views a lot of people in the modern era wouldn't consider like so progressive. Like, for example, eugenics was extremely popular and considered like a socially progressive cause in the early 20th century. That's a definite no for so many reasons now. But like so many historical writers these days, they think, oh, I can't write a compelling, relevant historical character unless they're, yeah, stick it to the man, like rip down all those sacred cows, act like 21st century current year values person instead of like a person who is actually shaped by the era he or she lived in, and in which case, why are you even making your story historical if you just want to give everyone like current year values? Like, seriously, like, just think it through. Like, some people, they just don't really understand historical fiction means, historical. It has to be like historical, like relevance, like accuracy. And I loved reading the personal prayers throughout the book from James and Bella. Like, of course, like there's a time and place for the fixed prayers in the liturgy, whatever your religion is, but personal prayers that come from the heart when you're not at like church or synagogue or wherever other house of worship you are, even like praying the service on your own at home when you like can't get out, like a snowstorm or whatever, you don't have a car, something like that. There can be like more dearer to God or more personally meaningful because they're your own words, like at that moment in time for your situation, instead of, oh, I'm just praying by rote. Oh, I've prayed this service like 100 times in my life, or I go to church, synagogue, like every single day, like 3 times a day, or whenever your like personal house of worship has its services. Yeah, there's of course like a beauty in that, but sometimes those like prayers from the prayer book written by other people, they can start to feel a bit like it's not as personal as like asking God for like petitions from your heart, like the characters in the book do. I really like that. And also there was this theme that the answer to prayer, sometimes it can be like, no, not yet, like not how you expected, and that does happen many times throughout the book. And of course it can feel a bit disappointing, like James wants to like get his success and like, oh, I want to have like love and immediately and find out who my parents really were, and I want to get money and have a successful airplane and everyone's noticing me. But sometimes the prayers are just answered a little bit more challengingly, differently, and that can lead you to like a path you never expected, but it's the path your life was meant to take, and it wouldn't have taken that path if your prayers hadn't been answered that way. And I love, they talk about, thanking God for their own talents and skills. They're not, trying to be someone they're not or wish for a different situation. And that reminds me of the beautiful George Harrison song Pure Smoky from his album 33 and a Third. And he says in his book I, Me, Mine, talking about the lyrics, and it's obvious from the lyrics and the chorus themselves, it's not just about thanking Smokey Robinson for his like many years of beautiful music and his beautiful voice. He's also thanking God for giving Smokey that talent. The line in the chorus, I want to thank you, Lord, for giving us pure Smokey. So, ultimately our talents are on loan from God, and that's who we should be thanking, not just the person who has the talents. And like interests may be inherited. And, James gets an idea eventually. Oh, his father was also interested in aviation. So, sometimes not just our how we look, but also our interest can come down from our ancestors. I like to think I get my interest in like reading and writing and learning from my 36th great grandfather, King Alfred the Great of England. I should do a whole video someday on my famous ancestors. And I also liked how he talks about like Bella is a bit happier with a simpler lifestyle she discovers when she's visiting James and the professor at Martha's farm. Her family wasn't always like rich. They had a fairly simpler lifestyle in a smaller house. And like being rich, I mean, of course it's awesome to have money and access to all these great things, but it doesn't necessarily make you happier. For example, in my hometown of Albany, New York, my favorite neighborhood was the Pine Hills neighborhood where I went to elementary school. It's more like very working class and lower middle class, but the people there are humbler. The houses might be simpler, but it's not, like, oh, fancy and like snobbish. And the price shopper there and the branch of the Albany Public Library, they're, smaller, but they just have different things going on. The people there feel a little bit more down to earth. And the independent movie theater, just like so many things I like about that neighborhood that just weren't necessarily there in the more like, upper middle class and rich neighborhoods of Albany. So like the moneyed world doesn't always necessarily mean like the best world for you personally. And then, I mentioned the genealogical family research. I've loved doing my own genealogy and finding out, wow, I'm related to like 3 presidents and some really, I had no idea, like some medieval monarchs in Europe. That was really totally unexpected. And another storyline I liked was the professor and Martha. They're not the main focus by, a long shot. They're like, secondary characters, although they're still important, but they're like an older second chance couple. They were in love when they were younger, but events, like kept them apart for various reasons. Martha ended up marrying some other guy and having kids with him, but now she's widowed, and the professor and Martha are finding their way back to one another in a more romantic way. And I'd really love when books and movies show like older couples getting a chance at love. It shows, of course, like generally speaking, the kind of love and romance you have when you're like in your like 40s, 50s plus, it's not going to be nearly the same like heady, like excitement, like butterflies in the stomach type of love as like James and Bella are having in this book or any other younger couple, but it's no less, like real or serious or sincere. It's just different, and it gives me hope. Maybe I'll finally have another relationship and get married and have a blood child before time runs out. And another theme I liked, don't automatically assume the worst or assign motivations to people without giving them a chance to explain. That happens so many times in life, and like sometimes we just feel like, oh, I know what I saw or what I think I saw or how I interpreted this, but and I'm going to run with it and assume all these things, and this person was lying to me or just not being particularly sincere. But sometimes you need to give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't just like automatically assume because like the way your mind is working or you've been like hurt in a similar way in the past. And another theme I liked, we're never truly distant from God, even when we feel abandoned or as though life circumstances have disgraced us. That's how James feels, and that's a big thing about the Christian religious aspect of this book. He's coming back to a faith in God and feeling, oh, I really am a true, like a son of God. God really values me and loves me and wants the best for me, even though I felt like I was completely unworthy of God or religion because of my parents having me out of wedlock. That really drives home for me as well. When I was like in junior high school, I thought I was like an agnostic, borderline atheist, but now I realize I was just really angry at God and like upset because I was being bullied. I even blamed God for giving me chickenpox in February of '94. I thought it was a punishment for no longer being interested in religion, but like now I realize you can't deny or doubt the existence of like someone you feel such strong emotions for, like even when they're like negative emotions. Like, so I was not really agnostic or borderline atheist. I just felt like betrayed and abandoned. And of course, I've long since worked out those issues. Another theme I liked, compatibility in a couple is about shared values and personalities, like, and religious beliefs. It's not just, social status or their rank or their money. Like, you could be a perfect match on paper. Oh, we both come from like the same, like, exact class position. We went to the same school. We're like within, like, 5, 6 years of one another's age. We live in the same area. We have all the same friends, but we're not really compatible in deeper ways, because this person is like super, like, secular, doesn't want anything to do with religion at all, even like personal religious stuff. And I like this hobby, and this person has a completely different hobby, and they have different values. Like, I want 12 children, and this person only wants 2 of them. Or like, I like this style of like decorating the house, and this person is much more minimalist. And I like, traveling, and this person just wants to stay at home all the time playing chess by the fireplace. So, you have to think about those things when you're like choosing whom you might want to marry. And the local faith community is like very important. As Bella discovers when Martha invites her to start going to the church, she really likes it, and Martha says it helps her to sustain her like faith connection, and also staying connected to the people locally. Like, be thankful for what we already have, instead of saying, God, give me $1 million, or make me the first one to fly across the English Channel and have worldwide accolades and stuff like that. Just be thankful for what you already have, and the gifts and talents God saw fit to give you. Like, forgiveness and atonement, those were themes also throughout the book. And family can be made from love, not just blood, as we see through the storyline about how James was raised by the professor and Martha from a very young age, and they, consider one another family, even though they're not blood related. So, of course, adoption doesn't always have to be like, physically, like legally adopting a child. It can also be like raising it as your surrogate family when there's no like family around to take them in, and appearances aren't always what they seem. Getting back to the thing about don't automatically assume someone has bad motives. Our lives are preserved in accidents for a greater purpose, as James discovered. Like, I was in a terrible car accident when I'm 23. I've talked about this in a number of community posts and blog posts. Haven't done a video about it yet. Like, if this had happened 40 or 50 years earlier, I probably would have lost my right leg. And it's a miracle so many people said I was not, killed or more severely injured, because of, the way she ran almost all the way over me. My tibia and fibula were shattered in my right leg. I had 2nd-degree burns on my stomach and abdomen. If I were a taller, thinner person, I probably would have been like thrown or crushed. And thank God I didn't like bang my head or any internal organs. Like, the worst so-called like injuries were the broken right leg and the burns and a couple of like gashes and scrapes and bruises and cuts. I really do believe my uncle was like watching over me from above, and because my purpose, my mission in life wasn't yet over, just as James discovers his mission in life wasn't over yet, because like he should have by all rights been killed along with his mother when they fell off of that cliff when he was a baby. But he was preserved for a greater purpose. And I love the depiction of early aviation and the risks these people were taking. Like, no one had done this before. Many people thought it was physically impossible to fly across the English Channel, like, because like no one had ever done it before. Of course, now we take for granted, most people, oh, people fly overseas all the time, or long distance in the same like large country like the US or Canada. Like, why wouldn't you like think it's safe? But no, like, it was like really scary for people. And I have to give a shout out. Like, a few months ago, I discovered an awesome YouTube channel called Captain Steve with 3 E's in it. He recently had to retire, turned 65. He has a great channel, so many awesome videos about, flying and like aviation safety, and how you shouldn't be afraid of flying and like walking through plane accidents. His first video is called In My Seat. Like, it's again another miracle he's here. He doesn't, know like why God decided his time wasn't up yet, but Captain Tom's time was up. He was signed on as a pilot on one of the 9/11 flights, but the more senior pilot bumped him off at the last minute. And so that really like strengthened his Christian faith and made him think like, why was I preserved, and like Tom's time was up, and that, really made him think differently about his life going forward. Like, and it's important to bounce back from disappointments and failures, as the characters do many times in the book. Like, negative experiences may ultimately lead to very rich rewards, even if it's not what we wanted and not the way we had hoped our prayers would be answered. And it can lead to a path our lives may not have taken otherwise, as I had said earlier. Yeah, I mentioned the siblings can have very different interests and goals despite being raised in the same home. And it was a very realistic portrayal of Edwardian society and the culture, like no anachronisms. That's one thing, like, it's kind of turned me off to a lot of, like, more recently published historical fiction. These, I mean, I don't really think they have, like, ill will or they're doing it to be, like, deliberately ignorant or anything like that. They just think, oh, I'm going to depict my characters as, like, radical 21st century iconoclasts, even though, like, they would have been looked on as, like, lunatics or, like, the community, like, person to avoid if they did all these things back in the day. Like, so that was, like, a really good thing. And again, as I said in my previous video about Mrs. Turansky's other book, and in my videos about Carolyn James's 3-book series, The Ladies of Summerhill. Like, I'm not Christian myself, I'm Jewish, but I really resonate with the greater themes in these books. They can be relevant to people of all faiths or even, like, no faith. It just, like, depends. Like these are, like, a lot of these things are, like, universal, not necessarily specifically Christian, although of course a Christian reader will, like, take them personally the way they were most intended. And, like, a lot of people who haven't read Christian fiction, they might think, oh, it's constantly going to be like everyone is constantly, like, praying on every single page and quoting the Bible and saying praise the Lord like every 10 lines. It's not like that it's not like that at all. It's about how, the Christian themes and values inform these characters' lives and how they're, like, growing in faith and, saying the prayers and things like that. So, give it a chance if you haven't, like, read any Christian fiction lately or, like, have never read it. It's a really wonderful experience. I'm looking forward to reading more of her books. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Let me know, like, what your own favorite, like, historical romances are, or if you like Christian historical fiction. Thanks again for watching. Bye.